Okay, welcome to Macroeconomics. We're going to be talking about money supply and everything else you need to know today. My name is Joad, and here we go. We have types of money. You have your M1 money, M2 money, M3 money, and those are your basic foundations for the money system. Your M1 money would consist of minted coins, cash, demand deposits, stuff that's highly liquid, that has a high liquidity. Your M2 money is your saving deposits, gold, etc. And it's lower liquidity, which means it's harder to get the money faster than you need it. It's used as a medium of exchange. For your M3 money, it's not as important. You won't get asked about that on an AP test or like AP class test. But if you're curious, it does deal with businesses and essentially their finances and capital. Fiat money, it's meh. You don't really need to like focus a ton on fiat money, but just know that it's to be money that's available to be used. So like your currency, it's not really backed up by anything ever since Nixon, at least for America, ever since Nixon removed the gold standard. And then you have your commodity, which is money that has another value or use. So a good example here would be gold and silver. You know, you can melt gold, make jewelry, use it whenever you want, and then you can end up selling it later and doing what you need. All right, next we're going to be talking about banks, and banks follow a set of rules. They have to abide by the reserve ratio, denoted by RR here, and it's what the bank must keep by law. So when you deposit money into the bank is keeping a certain portion of that money just in case someone wants to withdraw money and they have to have it there, or else it'll cause a bank run. And no one really wants a bank run. I mean, come on, let's be real here. Um, Banks loan out the extra money from what you originally had after the reserve ratio. So essentially, your initial deposit, you subtract the reserve ratio from that initial deposit. All that extra available money is money that can be loaned out. Um, and the way banks do this is they use a T account, which is your liabilities versus your assets, and we're gonna come up to that soon here, and I'm gonna explain more on that. But what I want you to understand is fractional reserve banking. And that's the real big picture here. As banks are as people put more money into banks, then in turn the banks have more money to loan out, and because they have more money to loan out, other people will take those loans, and when other people take those loans, they deposit it into the bank, and then that leads into what we know as the money multiplier effect, which we'll also get to. So let's see here. We're going to be talking about government right now, and specifically monetary policy. I'll make a video on fiscal policy another time, but this deals more with what we're talking about here. Um, you have expansionary monetary policy, contractionary monetary policy, and basically what that does is the government changes the supply of money, and I'll show you on the graph that you should know, um, and how it affects pretty much everything else. So with an expansionary monetary policy, if the government increases the supply of money, then your interest rates are going to decrease, and you're going to know this from the graph, which will lead to your investments increasing. And because aggregate demand is comprised of the factors of GDP, investment being one of them, since investment's increasing, then aggregate demand will be increasing. Now, for contractionary, when you decrease the supply of money, you increase the interest rate, which subsequently decreases the investment rate, and then that decreases the aggregate demand. Um, you have some shifters here. Your reserve ratio, it's pretty much it's an inverse property. If your reserve ratio decreases, then the supply of money will increase. If and you have your discount rate, which is the rate that banks charge each other to loan. If your discount rate if your discount rate decreases, then your supply of money will increase. Vice versa, it's an inverse relationship between these two. It's a helpful thing to remember. But possibly the most important function of the monetary policy is the open market. Open market, there are two main things that you should know. Buy bucks big money and sell bucks little money. So if the government wants to increase the supply of money, they're going to buy bonds. And by buying these bonds, you're putting in more money into the economy, which increases the money supply. And by selling bonds, you're decreasing the money supply. You're decreasing the money supply. Now this is a T chart, T table, however you want to call it, and it's broken up into liabilities and assets. Now these can get a lot more confusing, but for our purposes here, we're just going to be doing a little basic rundown here. So you deposit $1,000 into the bank. Let's say that $100 of that goes towards the reserve ratio, and then the excess amount after the reserve ratio is $900. Now, what you're looking at here, what you're going to be mainly asked about, is what is the reserve ratio? Well, let's take a look here. If our reserve ratio is $100 and we originally had $1,000, that's 10%. So what you want to do is remember your multiplier formula, which is 1 over RR. And since we have 1 divided by point 0.1, you multiply the point 0.1 and you find out that your multiplier in this scenario is 10. So that's how much money is going to be going out. And then this ties into the fractional reserve banking, because the more you loan out money, the greater that the money supply would increase. Let's take a look at the monetary policy graph here. It's going to look a little confusing at first here, but here's some of the key factors that you need to know. When you label, you're going to need to know how to label. If you know how to label, everything else will come so much easier to you, okay? Let's take a look here. On our x-axis, we have quantity of money. On our y-axis, we have nominal interest rate. This is different from the loanable funds market in that the loanable funds market has real interest rate. But this graph correlates with that graph, and I'll show that in another video here. So imagine we have one monetary supply. Your line for supply is going to be right here. It's your money supply. It's going to be perfectly vertical. And then your demand curve is going to be downward sloping. Usually demand does not increase. Usually it can happen, but the main changes in this graph would be from the federal action. And now keep in mind that only the federal action can shift money supply. So, assuming this is equilibrium right here, ignore these two money supplies. You have your quantity of money, equilibrium, and you have your nominal interest rate, equilibrium. Now, let's say you were to increase the money supply. Well, then you would have a shift here to the money supply 1, and you would show that on your graph. And what this does is it decreases the nominal interest rate, and then it leads to the other factors that we just discussed earlier. Now, if you wanted to decrease the money supply, you're going to shift your money supply curve to the left, and by doing so, you're increasing the nominal interest rate because now you have a new equilibrium. Forgot to mention that over here. You have new equilibriums as you shift the curve. And that's going to be all for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and leave some comments if I missed things out or made mistakes. And yeah.